Meet Julian. He rubs his eyes as he stares at the clock. 2:17 a.m. He's sitting in his home office in Brooklyn. Half-eaten protein bar on his desk, a dozen browser tabs open, and a blank spreadsheet glowing back at him. He knows he needs to map out financial projections for the new product launch, but his brain feels like a browser that's frozen because of too many open windows. Julian runs a small AI startup, which helps healthcare providers to automate patient scheduling. And he's had some success. He has a few clients. He has a team that's lean but brilliant. And yet still, he feels like he's caught in a cycle that is not sustainable. Every decision goes through him. Every client issue, every system bug, every question about budgeting. And he keeps telling himself, just push through. But pushing through has him skipping workouts, snapping at his kids, and missing calls from his wife, who's waiting for him to come to bed. Julian was a successful software engineer for over a decade, where he had stability, paycheck, structure. And now he's founder, CEO, head of ops, customer service lead, and unofficial janitor. And the truth is, he has no real financial plan, no succession strategy, no sense of whether he's building a business or just burying himself in it. And he knows he needs help, not just with hiring or growth, but with stepping back and thinking long-term about wealth, time, legacy, freedom. Today, we have a special episode where I am meeting with Bobby Mascia in person to discuss Julian's story. So Bobby is the founder and CEO of Green Ridge Wealth Planning and the owner of multiple businesses, including an 18-store Dunkin' franchise. So Bobby's known for helping entrepreneurs like Julian design a life of freedom, not just financial gain. And Bobby has this rare mix of street smart business strategy and financial planning to help leaders to scale while being able to step back, to build while being able to breathe, to grow while enjoying the process. And I'm excited to hear what Bobby would offer to someone like Julian, someone who has a lot of drive and ambition and just needs a bit of clarity and strategy and support to build a business that works for him, not one that runs him into the ground. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Bobby, we're going to get into Julian's story here in a bit, but I'm curious to learn more about yours. I was reading about you, man. So you graduate Lehigh University, you're hitting Wall Street, but then you do something that you said you sworn off completely, and you joined the family business. What happened?
That's a great, I don't know. What happened, man? I'm still trying to ask myself that very question. So I just kind of take you back, right? So we're in early 2000. I graduated Lehigh 2000, and here I am. I'm down in Manhattan. I'm working with buddies, all around, living the life, enjoying everything. And 2001, 9/11 happens. And at the time, I was taking my CFA, which is the Chartered Financial Analyst designation, and I was going back to Stern for some graduate classes to get my MBA. And then, we have this disaster that happens right across the street from my office. So my office is no longer my office. Now we're working remote, not the same remote that we work in today, where you pop on a Zoom call and everybody's able to share information with shared drives. It was a lot more difficult. It was a lot more complicated to try to get information back and forth. So I remember I'd gone home to visit my parents, and my dad's like, "You look like shit." And I was like, "Thanks. You look phenomenal yourself. Like, what's up with that?" And he says, why are you killing yourself? We come and work in the family business. Sit down, listen, I love you. I'm not coming to work in the family business. I have no interest. I don't want to deal with my aunts, with my uncles, with the whole dynamic. Like, that is not something that I see as a place for me to put my time, energy, and effort. Let me do what I do. Like, this is what I want to do. So he's kind of like, all right. And he dribs and drabs. He kept bringing it up over and over again. Well, fast forward, my mother was born with congenital heart disease. So my mother had to go in for a valve replacement surgery for her heart. She had open heart surgery. Obviously, that was a little bit wearing. He and I spent some time in the hospital together while she was there. And 18 months after that, he ended up going in for a rush open heart surgery, quintuple bypass. So at that point, I've always been an Italian guy from Jersey, family guy. Through that whole conversation, I ended up doing the one thing I told myself I'd never do. And I joined on the family business. And in the 9 years that I spent, we built it from about 20 locations. At that time, he had been franchising Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins and Rita's Ice. He had been doing it for about 20 years at that point. So in the 9 years, we grew it from 20 to 40 locations. And it wasn't until after I had my second son when I had the revelation that I needed to go and follow my own path.
I want to learn a little bit about what you found to be the big game changer in building out the family business. Before I get there, I'm just curious myself. How did you end up figuring out how to work with family? Because I get, like, for example, my mother will tell me, "Oh, let's get into real estate investment together." And I go, "No way, Ma. I could not. I love you, but but I don't think I could work with you." How did you make that work?
So, it was a family business. And the reason that I didn't want to get involved was because of the dysfunction that was the family business. And, I think when you go through something, whether it's something that's traumatic or it's something that's, life-changing, and there's an event, you have some retrospective digging to do. And I left the family business, and I had the choice of, do I try to become relevant again and continue down the same path, go work for somebody else in corporate finance and try to regain that path of investment banking? Or do I continue to feed the entrepreneurial spirit that I have and really help business owners make really good financial decisions based upon, the different elements that we can work with on financial planning and investment management? Yeah, I chose obviously the latter. I have Greenridge Wealth Planning now. Mm-hmm. In the process of doing that, I had the opportunity obviously to go back and cut my teeth and get my designations and get my licenses and all the series exams that I had to do. But one of the designations that I ended up going after that was available to me is a certified family business specialist. And I also got certified in business succession planning. And basically all that was like advanced estate planning stuff, advanced taxation, just to really work with the dynamics of a family business. But there also was a psychological component to that. So I didn't know how to work in a family business. I actually didn't learn how to do that until I left my family business, got into this business, was drawn into working with business owners, and learned through not only these designations and the further education that I went through, but also the clients that I started taking on and the different experiences that I had just through their lens to work with them and their team of professionals. And then, like anything else, you don't know what you know until you start to do it. And then as you start to do it and start to have conversations and really kind of immerse yourself into it, that's when you can turn around and say, "Oh, wow, I get it now. I get what I could have done differently. And I get how to advise people that when they're in the thick of it, what are the things that they can do to avoid my situation where I got up and I left. My dad didn't talk to me for a year.
Wow. So there's a lot of, I find the same in my experience of, I now have made a lot of mistakes that anyone who, let's say, wants to build a coaching business or they want to build a speaking business, I can say, hey, I've been there. I did it. I did all the things wrong that I don't want you to do. Right? So what were some of those mistakes, some of those lessons that you learned from that experience that you now do your best to ensure that any other entrepreneur avoids as they're growing their business?
When I think about a successful family business and what are the key elements to doing, to really creating that, it's really comes down to the same thing that are the pillars in Green Ridge Wealth Planning for our clients. It's communication and transparency. And what ends up happening more often than not when you have these two generations, parents and children, is that even when they're in the business, that parent and child relationship, it doesn't go away. So communication in terms of what are the expectations? What's your role? What's your responsibility? How do we do this? What does your career path look like? How do you what is it that you have to do in order to get to where my expectations are to give you more? When you can explain that out, then you have the child who isn't creating their own set of expectations because they're making assumptions. Yeah. What more so happens than not is you have the parents that have their expectations. You have the children who have their expectations. They never communicate them. The longer they don't communicate, the more etched in stone in each respective minds they become. And then when the communication happens, and it's usually through conflict, that's when things go awry.
Yeah.
So I always say, communication, transparency, having that plan, having those hard discussions that probably were not common in the relationship as you were growing up or bringing them up are quintessential, but also understanding what hat you're wearing when you're having a conversation. So you and I are in a family business, and let's say we're brothers, or let's say you're my dad. When are we talking as family members, right? Brother to brother. When am I wearing the hat as business owner, my percentage of business ownership versus your percentage of business ownership? And when are we talking about when it's our actual role within the company? So we may be brothers. We may be within a couple of years of one another. We may be 50-50 owner, but I may be the sales guy and you might be the CEO. And when you're talking to me as the CEO and I'm the sales guy, I've got to apparently take direction because that's the role that you play.
Yeah. And I think that this applies to not just being an entrepreneur. This could apply in corporate as well. I mean, think about it, right? Like if I'm in a relationship with someone where I'm their manager within this, corporate environment too, this would apply. And one thing I hear a lot what people say, and it actually bothers me when people say this, say, oh, well, I shouldn't be friends with the people I work with. Like, in other words, there should just be a very serious corporate relationship, or let's say in a business, just a business relationship. So I disagree with that. I think more along the lines of just know what hat you're wearing in the conversation, and friendships can cultivate naturally as well. What are your thoughts on that when people say things like, okay, work is work, separate that from it being something personal?
I think it takes a strong personality. It takes practice to be able to define and not have a blurred line between the two. Because there are people who they cannot do that. They don't know how to do that. They don't have the tools. They don't have the experience. They don't have the training. They don't have the guidance, the mentorship. For a lot of people, that's not an inherent relationship. For a lot of people, they need to work. They don't have them readily available, that skill set. And if you don't have it, but you want to be able to have that friendship sort of situation, it's going to be a lot harder for the person who sits higher in the food chain than the lower one, because they're going to be the ones who are really defining that line.
Yeah. So you're saying it's really suggestive of the person's personality and let's say, their ability to communicate and the skills that they developed over their experience.
And how aware they are of that.
Yeah.
Do they have the tools and the skill set? Have they been given the guidance? Do they know how to keep those two separate relationships in a productive way?
Right. And I know that you find that people cannot build things on their own. I read something that you wrote where you were suggesting that you have to have a team of people around you. But I'm sure that's something that you had to learn, though, because I imagine there was probably a time where you were putting a little bit too much on your plate. And I think we all go through it. So walk me through what that experience might have been like for you, where you felt like, okay, I'm maybe taking on a little too much here. How did you recognize it? And then what were some of the steps that you took after that?
Dude, I think for founders, like most people can relate to Julian.
Yeah.
You get to a point where you build a business and there's a certain set of, limitations that you create, right? You talk about a team. You talk about the need for a team. I mean, can you build something without a team? Yes. Does it become harder to sustain without a team? Most definitely. So what is the team there for? Well, most people go into business for themselves because they want some sort of freedom. They want the freedom to be able to make as much money as they possibly can without a ceiling. They want the freedom of time. They want the freedom of flexibility. Well, how do you make more money, create more time, and create more flexibility on your own, which is you holding the bag? And there are very few roles or businesses to where that's the case, right? I mean, if you talk about personal branding, if I go through a personal branding business and I'm going to do it all myself, let's talk about the podcast. I'm going to record, edit, distribute, find the guests, book the guests. You're a speaker. You know how hard it is to do everything, to get the engagement, understand where the room is. Like, that's a lot of work. Yep. When do you get the you time that you need to refuel to be ready, so this way you're on for all those moments? That time starts to thin out, right? If you're doing everything, it thins out. So the idea of a team is really to just help get you that flexibility, help you to make that more money, because it's more money per hour, right? You got to look at money and how much you're getting paid on an hour, and you don't really want to find yourself doing menial tasks. If you can hire somebody to do it, allowing you to do more revenue generating tasks, right? Higher revenue generating. So, I look at the team, and I look at when you come to that situation like Julian, is you become conflicted. And it's a matter of, do you have, the first comment usually with those with this situation is like, do I have enough money to do this? There's nobody else who can do it. I'm the only one who can do it. I got to find somebody. I got to train them. I can't even afford that. Like, if I pay them, that means I'm going to make less money. And you have all this head trash that you build up, all these reasons why you're the only person who can do it. And you have to come to that moment yourself where you almost like tell yourself, enough, like, stop with that. You're not the only person who could do it. And we go through these exercises to where, because I've done it with business owners before, of how does your daily activities, your weekly, monthly activities look, and where are the spaces where you're getting paid more? What are the spaces that you're doing low level activities, low paying activities? And how do we then create the justification for the financial piece of it? Because it's usually breaking down the mental piece of it, that self-psychological ego, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I'm the only one who can do it, or I've been doing it this way for so long. How am I going to figure out how to do it differently? That's the process.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the mental component, because I do think in Julian's story, his struggle has a lot to do with control. He wants to control everything. That's why he is taking it all on. And it's such a common thing that I see in people, both as entrepreneurs and in corporate. This is applicable both in both arenas, where someone in a position of authority doesn't know how to let go of control. So how did you figure that out for yourself? How did you learn how to work through that desire to want to control everything and be able to start delegating more?
I got to that moment enough. I was tired of feeling the way that I did, which was overworked and stressed out. And I knew that I had to find a better way. Now, I didn't have a me to come and guide me through this issue. I did it pretty much the old school way of tripping over my own feet and making a whole lot of mistakes.
Right.
But that was like I hit a tipping point where there was no other way. And I started to look back at just the time that I spent with my family and my family organization, the goals that I had for myself. And I started to think more about how do I do things differently? Like I'm still kind of stuck in the old school ways. I'm on this border, this like almost like a seesaw, because I have this way that I got brought up, which my dad was very old school. Everything was about scarcity. It was where do we cut? It was never how do we grow? It was always what is it that we do to figure out a solution that's going to work for the moment, not who do we need to bring in to find out the long-term solution so this way we can go further and faster. And I think when you're brought up around that mentality and you're looking to shift, there's got to be something that is, that's monumental that helps you get out of that to get you out of that mindset. And the first few years of putting this together, I got into 6 figures of debt because putting a business together is not free. It's not cheap. Getting people to invest and building, a staff and the whole infrastructure, the software, it's not cheap. So you go into this situation where you're building on and you're going, I feel like I'm fighting like uphill, I'm going against the stream. How do I go with the stream? And going with the stream was, who do I need to, instead of what do I need to do to fix this? Who do I need to bring in to help me with this? And that switch of who, instead of what do I need to do, it's who do I need to get, was really I would say the turning point for me, because employee number 1, employee number 2, then I brought in my partner. Now we're 13. It was needed.
Yeah. And what I assume it also allowed for you to do is to get out of the day-to-day minutia of the work and then be able to kind of get your head above the water and look farther into the future.
Well, it's super frustrating because at the moment and I don't think that most people do this. I think that most people do just what you had said, where they get so caught in working in the business that they don't have the time to work on the business.
Yeah.
I would take the time to work on the business, and then I'd get stuck in the business, and then I would get frustrated that I'm not attaining the goals that I had set when I thought about what it is that I need to do when I was working on the business. So I became, I was in this constant struggle back and forth of like, I know what I need to do. I know what I want to do. I know what I'm capable of doing, but why the hell am I not doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. So you had also recognized, you said earlier, there are some things that you need to do to stay energized and take care of yourself. What did you find are the things that really help you to be able to recharge and stay focused when you are working? Because the average person, right, they're starting a business, they can work themselves to the ground. But I think it's less about knowing when to, let's say, stop, and knowing more about what you need to do so you can keep going, right? So what for you are some of those energy fueling activities that you recognize, I need to commit to this regularly so I can be at my best?
So I'll tell you what, that's changed over time. I could tell you where it started. So where it started was I left my family business. I'm in this business, building this business, Greenridge Wealth Planning. And I am working the same as I worked in the family business, which was basically 7 days a week around the clock. Now, a lot of the professionals that you want to meet, you meet off hours because it becomes networking and you want to get your name out there and you're shaking hands and you're entertaining. And all of a sudden it becomes, not only am I getting up early and getting to work, but I'm also find myself out late at night, not home till 10 o'clock. Now, I told you, I left my family business after I had my second kid. I have 3 kids. My wife at the time was like, we're going to have a new rule. You're going crazy. You're working too hard again. The whole point of having a family and having the wealth that you're looking to chase is self-defeating if all you're going to do is work and not enjoy anything. I want you home at dinner. You have to make it home to dinner. If you need to go back and do some work in the home office, fine, but I want you home for dinner. So how many nights a week? She said, start with 2. And what I found was, started with 2, and it was the anxiety of not being out there was almost crippling. I'm not out doing this. And I wasn't really enjoying the time with my family, but I knew my wife will kill me if I'm not home 2 nights a week.
Yeah. Right.
It took me a good period of time to realize I'm not missing very much. And whatever it is that I feel that I'm missing, I have to figure out how to do that during the day. What are the things that I can free up during my day to make sure that I'm meeting or talking to the people that I would have been talking to or meeting in the 2 nights that I'm home? And what that did was it gave me a little bit of an exercise that I created for myself to start to identify where my time was most valuable and what I was doing that was extra. That was just the time that made me feel like I was being productive, but I wasn't necessarily being as productive as I thought I was.
Yeah. What's the, is it something like an Eisenhower matrix kind of thing? Or like, what's the strategy that you use now to be able to regularly check in on this? So that way you're not falling into the old patterns.
So this is, that was, that was 2018. So 8 years ago, 7 years ago. That's not even a problem for me anymore.
Okay.
So
you built it.
I'm home almost every night. I don't work on the weekends. I know what it is that I need to do. And it just came from practice. It came from practice and just my own self-awareness. And over time, I started to just develop that. I just started to develop that skill set.
Yeah. One thing I want to get your opinion on, because too often I hear people use this term, the work-life balance term. And I think it's so misunderstood. Here's what I mean. When we hear work-life balance, we think, okay, that means I must leave work to go to life and I leave life to go to work. But that's not really how it is. And so what I find is that there are seasons where I'm working a little bit more and I'm having to make some sacrifices, but I made that choice. And then other seasons where I'm freeing up my time a little bit more. So I want to get from your perspective, having gone through everything you've gone through from your family business to the business you build now, how do you see work-life balance, what people call that, or maybe you have a different term for it? How do you define it?
When I think about kind of my journey, and the way I define my own work-life balance, so to speak, that also has evolved.
Yeah.
I am just inherently a workaholic. If you gave me the opportunity to work every day, I would choose to work. It's very hard for me to not think about the next thing to do or what I have going on. But I also know that my health, it's almost like when you go onto an airplane. You get on a plane and they do this stupid thing where it's like pull out the flight
card,
the safety manual.
Yeah,
and let's go through it step by step together. And most people kind of like, I've already seen it 100 times. I know exits, something falls down. I put it on me and then I put it on the kid. And why do you put it on you first? Because if you pass out and putting it on the kid doesn't get it. You don't get it. You do nobody any good and you're done.
Yeah.
So put it on yourself first. So this way you can help others. And that mentality in life is like, I realize like I need to take care of myself. I need to figure out how to make sure that I'm working at like my peak performance and not just working because that's who I am mechanically.
Yeah.
So when I think about work-life balance, I feel that when I take the time in the morning to get myself prepared for the day, when I find the time during the day to have my exercise regimen, when I make sure that I'm eating healthy and not just shoving pizza down because that's the easiest thing and I haven't eaten since, 8 hours ago. When I'm a little bit more conscious of me, my work-life balance just kind of falls in naturally.
Yeah.
I don't feel so stressed to get to the next thing, to get the next thing done. Now, I was still thinking about it, but it doesn't come in as obsessively. The obsessiveness gets fueled by the stress, the anxiety, the not taking care of myself. I find myself going in this downward spiral.
Yeah. And
Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. And what you then have to recognize is if there is some depletion in energy, then something needs to change. So in other words, when you're going through that cycle the way you described, where you're waking up early, you're taking care of yourself, you're exercising, I'm assuming by the end of the day, you're not feeling absolutely depleted and exhausted and like you feel like you can't even be present with your family. No, you then had the energy to be able to make it through the whole day and be able to enjoy dinner with your wife and with your kids.
Yeah. And I just think that clarity also helps. I mean, there's different ways that you can get clarity. For me, when I have the mental clarity because of my physical exertion that I'm able to do through working out and making sure that I'm taking care of myself, as I've grown the business, there's, I have to eat my own food. There's some financial planning that I have to do. So when I know that I'm financially clear on what it is that are my spend parameters, save parameters, what's the money that I have available to me to continue to reinvest in the business. When I have that clarity, I'm good. When I have clarity on who the members of the team are, what they're accomplishing, what they're accountable for, that gives me clarity on my business. So that whole being able to then shift some of my energy, build the team and start to work on my business. I spend more time now working on the business to give people the right tools to work in the business so that this way everything functions and goes off without a hitch.
Yeah. It's like being able to know that there's a path ahead that you can see, meaning the clarity, right? It's like, I can kind of see where this is going, rather than it looking like this dark cave where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next. That could keep you in that state of anxiety where you're not able to really be fully present because you're like, I can't see past 10 yards ahead of me.
I spent years just driving. Like,
right.
What's the goal? Drive more and more, drive more and more, drive more and more. That after a while, you never know where you're going. There's no destination. There's no clarity. There's no understanding of where you kind of sit in your grand scheming or your grand plan. The quest for more will just consistently be a quest for more.
And there's no meaning to it because you're not seeing where it's taking you. Like, in other words, when you have that clarity, it's like, okay, I'm doing this because it gets me there. Therefore, it gives more purpose and meaning to the work you're doing, and you feel more energized doing it.
Well, I was just about to say, and then once you start to have that clarity, then you can start to find what your purpose is. Your purpose is no longer like survival, right? And when you first start a business, when you're in the trenches, purpose isn't one of the things that pop into the forefront of your mind. And you're like, oh, what's my purpose here? You're like, I need to make some money. I need to make sure the landlord's paid. I need to make sure that these bills are paid. I need to make sure the employees are paid. I need to make sure my home doesn't get foreclosed on. Once you have that clarity, you can then determine what is my purpose? Where do I sit? Where do I find the most intrinsic value in what it is that I do? And what am I giving to the world that's of value that's going to change people's lives or going to change how people do things?
Well, I appreciate that you're not thinking about purpose from this perspective of, I have to sit in my room and just think about purpose until it comes into my mind and then I have it. It's more of, no, when you engage in the activity and you're doing it, but then you gain some clarity through the work that you're doing, you then discover the purpose.
Yeah, and I think that if you can build a life where you don't have to have an agenda, where you have clarity, you've got confidence, you are an expert. They say it takes 10,000 hours, right? That's 1,000 hours, 10 years or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
You become an expert in what you do. You don't necessarily have to think really hard about the mechanics anymore, because that becomes second nature. Now, all of a sudden, life just becomes easier. And if you're doing things without really having like a total agenda, it's amazing how many things pop up that can bring you value.
Yeah. Yeah. I often refer to that as attachment to an outcome, right? Agenda, right? Which
Yeah.
is like, it needs to go this way. And there's this desperation that is fueling the activity because I got to pay the mortgage, right? Mm-hmm. And so then how can you tap into purpose? Because all you're doing is worrying about whether you're going to get to that result or not.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I even say it to my kids, it's karma's a real thing, right? Putting good energy out, like giving first, not for the purpose of getting back, but for the purpose of giving. When you could start to get to that point, it's amazing how much clearer things become even after you feel like they've already become clear.
Yeah.
But it's work.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Right. But work is at times the most rewarding thing. I mean, the challenge is sometimes the best part. I watched this one clip. It was David Blaine, the magician. Yeah. So he's being interviewed and he's talking about how he talked to these people who climb Mount Everest. And all of them said the same thing. They said, the best part of that experience is the climb. Every single one of them say it. Yeah, the mountaintop's nice too, but the climb is the most memorable part. That's where they grow. That's what they look forward to most, is the climb.
And I think a lot of people get caught up in the destination. They get caught up in the result.
Yeah.
Life is a journey. Enjoy the journey. It's not just about the destination. I think a lot of people get caught up in the destination. Well, I'm not there yet. I need to get to the next spot. And that's frustrating. That's a tough life. I've lived that life. It's a tough life to live.
Yeah, it's a anxiety-inducing, stress-filled life, and I think that's what Julian's experiencing.
Yeah, never fulfilling.
Right, it's never fulfilling. Now, I know that you do a lot of work in helping entrepreneurs to be able to plan ahead and not be just so heavily focused in the day-to-day work. How would you start with someone like him to be able to say, okay, I want to be able to help you to see beyond just what you're doing and create that freedom for yourself? What would be your process to help somebody like that?
And this is the interesting part about the business that I'm in, is Julian, for most people in my industry, in my space, is not a great client. It's not a typical client. Does Julian have enough assets for them to move over? And usually when you're looking at financial guidance and financial advice, you go, well, I want the advice. I want to get to that point. Most institutions, they won't take you. For us, we look at it as an art and science. Like, the science is the easy part. You want to give us money? We have processes. We have a team that deals with investments. We're really good. That's one of our core competencies. We can get that done. The art is getting to really know who you are and how we can bring value, so that this way we can pull you out of your stuck moment, like the podcast, like get you unstuck, so that this way you can start to put the right building blocks and foundational pieces in place to then grow to wherever it is that you want to go. But, the clarity of like putting a financial plan together at that space is not really sitting at the forefront of his need to do list. He needs to figure out, like, how can I get to sleep so I'm not up at 2:15 looking at spreadsheets and worrying about a product that I have to put out and what the financials are going to look like. I need to get that done. Like, I need to get that figured out. So really figuring out, like, what are the resources that you have? Like, what are the biggest hangups that you have, right? We have to look at self. For you, why are you doing this? That's usually the biggest thing. Why are you the one that's sitting up at 2:15? What are what the money that's coming in? We could talk about that. We could talk about revenue. We could talk about expenses. We could talk about, what if you hired somebody to do certain things? How much is it going to cost? What's the ultimate assumption that we're going to make? But until you get over why you can't be that, why you should not be that person, right? Right now, you can't get over the fact that you are that person. You need to be that person. We got to get you out of that first.
Hmm. So taking inventory of the things that are blocking him from having a pretty just natural or a healthy life, essentially, right? Because he's not having a very healthy schedule. He's staying up late. You want to look at what's causing that.
I want to look at, we got to make a couple of assumptions here. First thing I want to look at is like, what do you do? What is taking you through your day? Why are you feel like there's not enough hours in the day? And let's break that down. Let's break that down into things that you need to do, whether it's you are you have high expertise there, you are licensed specifically to do that. Like you there's nobody else in the organization that has that kind of license. What is it that you must do? Maybe it's just your core. It is your unique ability to be able to do this where others can't do it. And then what are the things that you don't have to do? Like these are things that somebody else can do and it's easy to get rid of. You don't have to do them. After we do that, then we've got to start to identify, okay, in this list of the things that you must do or you feel like are yours, this other list, we can now say, okay, delegation. That's an easy delegation right there. Then we can start to look, what are the things that you love to do? Where do you get energy from these actions or activities or tasks or projects or whatever it is on your list? Where do you get the most energy? What do you want to do more of? Then you can start thinking about, okay, where's the organizational chart? How do we build out this organizational chart to support? So you're doing your highest paid activities, the more of what you're really good at, and dishing off the rest of that other stuff. Yeah. And then once you can start to get that organizational chart under, like in picture, then you can start assigning, okay, how much is that going to cost me? And usually the hang up is the cost. And what we have to do is we have to talk about, if we're going to spend that money to bring in these additional people, and you're going to continue to work on what your unique skill set is, how much more is that going to bring to the company?
Yeah. Or even the other way, how much is it going to cost you if you don't do it?
That's the point.
Like not even just financially, but mentally and emotionally, right?
Well, once you can figure out what that benefit could look like,
yeah,
that obviously the gap from where we are today versus what that is now, that's your opportunity cost lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, for our boy Julian, he may just be a tech guy. He may just love tech. Great. If that's your spot, maybe you have to hire somebody who's going to drive the business in a different way. And I think a lot of business owners, and we got to make some assumptions. And I don't know what Julian's personality is, where his skills lie, but I think a lot of business owners, they get into the business because they're really good at what they do, and they don't necessarily have the skill set that it takes to build and grow a business. And that's okay, as long as you can identify, you don't let your ego get ahead of you, and you find the right person to bring in to help you with the things that you may not see as your biggest skill set or biggest, driver for the business.
Or just you don't love doing it. Like you don't like doing it at all. I mean, I know some people who are really incredible, intelligent human beings, but they don't want to talk to anyone. They don't want to have conversations.
Yeah.
And it's like, could they develop that skill? Yeah, they could, but they don't want to. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it just doesn't have enough ROI to really pursue.
Let's say Julian is a brilliant software designer, and he's just, I'm so smart. I am so good at this. I'm the only one who can explain it to other people to buy it from us. Is that true? I don't know. More than likely, if you are that good at software development, the likelihood of you being able to be really good at selling, you're probably going to get too technical. You're probably not going to create the story. You're probably going to be too in love with what it is that you built that you can't step aside and take any constructive criticism. You might not be the one to drive the sales and the revenue of that business, but you feel that you are. Yeah. You're stuck because I'm the best to do it. That's where a lot of the self-ego, the self-awareness and the ego needs to be tamed, is Look in the mirror, man. Are you the right person, or is there somebody out there that's better than that, better than you at that? And what is that going to do to your business if you're able to focus on the stuff that you're really good at?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this applies well beyond just one arena of entrepreneurship. Like, because I work with a lot of people in corporate, Bobby, and this is the same things we're talking about apply there.
Mm-hmm. Same thing.
It's the same thing because human psychology is the same across all boards, right? And the tendency to try and do everything is such a natural tendency for people. And I love that you walk through this process of taking inventory, being able to say, what are the things that only you can do? And even when you say, yes, that's something I can only do, is that true? Are you sure? Because your initial answer to that might be you think that you're the only one who can do it.
Well, think about the organizations, and I'm sure you've come across a lot where they've got their best, and I'm going to use sales again, get your best salesperson out there kicking butt. All of a sudden, it's like, we need somebody to run the sales team. He's so good or she's so good at sales, she should run the team. Likely first in line. And the reality of it is probably not likely first in line. Just because that person can sell doesn't mean that they can lead and manage a team. And how many institutions get themselves caught up with moving people, the right people on the right bus, but putting them on the wrong seat?
Yep. Well said. I think there's reactionary, they fall into reaction of a need. There's a need, let's just quickly solve it without taking a moment to consider what this person's skill set is, what do they really love? Because the person, of course, yeah, I'll take the promotion, right? More money, more authority, sure. But that person's not even considering, am I the right person for this? Is this something I'm actually great at? So I want you to imagine this scenario, because I always like to bring this up towards the end of a conversation, which is for you to imagine having met Julian. So let's say Julian is following you, checking out your material on social, your podcast, and he reaches out and he tells you his story, what he's going through. And you listen, you download, and then you want to maybe ask him some questions versus just giving him immediate advice. Mm-hmm. What would come to your mind first as to what you'd want to ask Julian?
I think the first thing that I want to know is, what is your goal? Close your eyes. What's your biggest dream of this business? What's your biggest dream of life? Actually, I would do that first. I want to know, what is your life goal? What is it that you want out of life? Mm-hmm. Then I would go to business, and then I would go to relationship. And the reason being is, if you can have a vision of what your life wants to look, of what you want your life to look like, well, now you're stepping outside of what the business is and you're looking at your goals. So maybe for Julian, and I'll be super materialistic with Julian, because it's much easier to be that way than it is to think any other way. Even if it's philanthropic, I got big goals. I want to be able to give money away to whoever, whatever institution that I have sitting most nearest and dearest to my heart. I want to be able to have a home that houses my 4 kids with ease and comfort. I want to be able to go on vacation and be able to provide them with the experiences that are going to enrich their lives moving forward and how they grow and develop as a person. I want to be able to pay for their colleges if they choose to go to college. If they don't choose, or they do choose to go to college and they want to start their own business, I want to be able to support them in the business that they provide. Now you can go, okay, quantitatively, you need a lot of fucking money.
Yeah. It's what is now, we have to create the bridge.
Right. What's the business look like? Okay, business got to make the business got to make some money. Okay, what are you doing now? What is your relationship? What does your relationship with your wife and your kids look like? You gave me a life vision. What does it look like? What's the legacy you want to leave behind? Get a little bit of information on that. Now it gives me a clear picture of who they are, what they stand for, and the thing that sits in between that's going to provide the fuel, the juice, and the energy to get them to where they want to be. That's the easy part. That strategy around the business. You have to understand who the person is. You have to understand how they make decisions. You have to understand what their hangups are. What's the barriers that they're creating for themselves? What are the barriers that are being created by others? And how do we get around them? So those are the types of things that I really want to learn when I decide whether or not I'm going to bring a client on and whether or not I can help them. Because, it's the video on my front page, it's an art and a science. The science is the easy part, but after the art has been appreciated, like we have to know who the person is and how they tick.
And I think that the way you just presented that is also to help them to figure out who they are. Like, in other words, people are probably coming to you without the answers initially.
No, it's an exercise.
Right, it's an exercise, right?
It's a conversation.
They never ask those questions, Bobby. And I find that that's so often the case for people. It's just, I've never even taken a moment to ask those questions. But I want to thank you, man, for taking time. And thank you for letting me use the studio, by the way. I forgot to say that earlier. It's amazing. And I got a chance to be here with you in person because I'm always doing these virtually. So I just want to know how much I appreciate that.
Listen, the podcast team loves the fact that we have this professional studio.
Yeah.
So to not be able to use it at every opportunity that we can would be a shame.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were able to enjoy it.
Yeah, I really did. I mean, it's amazing to have this, brother. And anybody listening, I highly recommend check out Bobby's work. You said your socials, there's a lot out there. Mascia? Is that how it's pronounced?
So,
because I was going to say Mascia and I'm like, wait a minute, I should ask him. I haven't even said your last name out loud.
Say it again.
Mascia.
So I get Mascia and Mascia. Mascia is the way I say it. My wife says Mascia.
Okay, but what's the right Mascia?
My mother says Mascia. My sister says Mascia.
Now you're confusing the hell out of me, man.
I know. Yeah, I know. So is everybody else. I think the only incorrect way we have heard it is Mascia. We are not Mascia. So as long as you don't say Mascia, you're pretty close to the rest of it.
But you
Mascia.
say Mascia.
Mascia.
Bobby Mascia. So anybody Google Bobby Mascia and you'll be able to find a lot of stuff. Your website's there, Greenwich Wealth Planning, everything they'll find just from a simple Google search, as well as looking at your socials, and they'll find everything they need.
Everything from personal to business to philanthropy to social to, you name it, it's all out there. We don't hide it. We don't hide anything.
Thank you again, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you.
Man, was that fun to be able to have that conversation with Bobby in person. So grateful to Bobby and his team for allowing us to use his studio. And I hope to be able to do more of those. That was great. That was fun. It's given me a new goal with this podcast to be able to have those conversations in person. But for now, let's get into our insights. Let's get into our actionable takeaways. First of 3 insights. Number 1, communication, transparency, and expectations. Well, it's kind of 3 in 1. But he said those 3 things are what allowed for him to find success with a family business. And yes, it applies to that. It applies to any business, I'd say. But it also applies to any group of people looking to achieve an aligned vision, looking to work together to achieve something. Knowing what hats you're wearing, what roles that you're playing, and being able to have those hard conversations. Second, insight. Instead of what do I need to fix this, who do I need to bring in to fix this? Switch from what to who. So often when we have a problem, we just want to put it on our own shoulders, right? But what Bobby was recommending is consider who could be a great resource for you to solve the problem so you don't keep piling things on to your own plate. Third, insight. Living for the destination is a tough life to live. I couldn't agree more. Bobby brought this up. If we're only living for the destination, we are always chasing, we're never happy. The journey is where it's at. Our actionable takeaways. First of 3. Number 1, complete a time audit. And this is a practice of self-awareness to be able to take inventory of the high level activity versus the low level activity. What are you doing that actually does produce results? And then also think of it from this perspective. Some of the questions Bobby asked: what drains your energy? What gives you energy? How much is it costing you to spend all that time doing this, and how much would it cost you to delegate it? Being able to take inventory of this and then question if you really are the only one who could do it. Are you really the only one who could do certain activities? Because very often we say we are, but that's not true. You can delegate that. You could hand that off to someone else. So you can stay in your zone of genius. Second, actionable takeaway. Give for the purpose of giving. I thought that was really great that he brought this up. I think we want to get to a place where we can, because so often when we're just in a place where we can't, but it's because we haven't really gained the clarity on how to delegate things and free up our time so that we could do things without an agenda, like he was saying. So let that be the goal, to be able to give just for the sake of giving. And then the third actionable takeaway: what is your life goal? What is the dream? Knowing this, going through an exercise for yourself. What is the life that you wish to create for yourself? What's the legacy that you really want to live or leave? And in knowing this, you can then reverse engineer it. You have to go through this exercise. And maybe if you haven't done it in a while, it's worth reflecting on and going through again. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to do a deeper dive into the time audit that Bobby brought up. And I'm going to walk you through a strategy on how to do this, where we can go through some traditional methods that I do think still work, as well as some of the more modern approaches to be able to help you to stay focused on the activities that do produce the greatest result, where you can stay in your zone of genius and be able to drop the rest. So we'll go through that on Friday. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.